A lot of questions yesterday were, my gosh, Michael Cohen rolled over. We had Manafort, getting found guilty on all these charges. This could become a political, if not constitutional crisis. And yet the market didn't seem to care one bit. Why not?
Yeah, and the VIX is here at 12, right?
The fear gauge is showing
no fear.
No fear, yeah.
Right, pretty much. Look, I think when you step back for a second and you try to figure out why is the VIX at 12, why is the SPX sort of pushing up against yet another fresh high against this sort of vortex of pretty tremendous political news coming out of D.C. Well, what does it really mean from a corporate earnings point of view, from an economic point of view? If you scroll forwards, okay, what does this do in the midterms? It certainly supports the case, reinforces the case that the Dems get the House, probably not the Senate, but you never know. And so what happens in that scenario? Well, you have gridlock, right? And so far, under a year and a half of Trump, you've got the tax deal, very market-friendly, economic-friendly policy that's sort of done. Hard to see that unwound, regardless of who has the House in November. And you've got, the sort of deregulatory trajectory. So if there is sort of a new phase of gridlock and some brakes put on the Trump policy machine, look, the Trump policy machine lately has not been about tax. It's been about tariffs, which is something that, perhaps if there were brakes applied to that, that's probably not. If anything, a market-friendly thing.
No, and in no way are we minimizing the trade fight or the impact of tariffs, because good men and women, as we have shown time and again on this network, are being hit locally in their business. But it is not, and I've heard people say it incorrectly, it's not $16 billion in tariffs. It's 25% tariffs on $16 billion in goods, or about $4 billion. Right. The U.S. government spends $10 billion a day to operate the federal government. So the actual remunerative value is very, very small, is it not? So far.
So far, right. It's really about the second order, third order impacts, and we've talked about this in the past. It's just very hard to price that stuff. We just don't know what's that going to be. If Google gets slapped with another $5 billion fine as some sort of quasi retort from a foreign country or foreign entity. So again, it's very hard to price it, and if the market were to price it, if the market were to suddenly sell off violently against a backdrop of really a very constructive macro backdrop, in other words, the dollar not surging and obviously strengthening but not surging, and rates really sort of behaving themselves, and inflation not.
I guess
going
the
higher.
issue though, Mike, I guess the fear is that and a guest we had point out, it's not certainly, and nobody's making a political statement on this. By the way, we don't know what's going to happen, but they did point out the other day that when Bill Clinton was impeached, it was 1999. Obviously, we had a different economy. It was more internet-based. The market rose at the same time. Yeah. So if the worst case politically were to happen, from a constitutional perspective.
Meaning impeachment.
Correct. And I know many people would say it's not the worst case. It's not a political statement. What it is I'm saying from a national sort of political crisis type perspective, that even necessarily historically would not doom us automatically from an equity perspective, would it?
No, that's correct. And if you go back, I mean,
it could. I'm not saying it won't. Again, you have to hedge everything.
Look,
but markets have powered through bad situations before.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, if Pence becomes president, if Pence becomes POTUS, that may even be considered a more market-friendly, economic-friendly scenario than Trump, who's going to, more likely continue with a somewhat unconventional, from a certainly conservative, fiscal conservative point of view. That sort of policy trajectory is now getting into more and more untraditional, arguably less market and economic-friendly environment.
Yeah, it's weird. If you look at the New York Times this morning, about all the first 8 or 9 stories have Trump's name in them. I mean, right now, this is the news cycle. We'll see what happens. The markets have kind of shrugged it off. Michael Purves, last final comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think there is one thing to consider, though, in all this stuff. So, we talked about this benign risk environment. But if the news flow gets to the point where it looks like the far left can take the White House in 2020, that is going to be a major market risk.